Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to wait for you guys to tune in. Good morning. Good morning. How's everyone doing? I have a good topic for you guys today. I know you guys keep asking about this, so I'm just going to kind of talk about it today. I'm going to just try and do this series on educating you guys on different types of avenues to get a green card other than just answering random questions. Because I know majority of the time the questions are, when am I going to get my EAD or how long does my EAD take? But I think that, ultimately you want to make sure that you understand, different cases so that you can determine what you're eligible for and not just put an application just to get an EAD, but that you're actually eligible for it. Anyway, if this is your first time tuning in, my name is Aisha Chidole. Someone is saying no sound on their end. I think that might be you. Is anyone else not hearing me? If you can hear me, put a thumbs up so I know that you can hear me. If not, I'll probably have to log out and log back in. But my name is Aisha Chidole, and I'm an immigration lawyer here in Atlanta. I represent clients all over the United States with their family immigration matter, humanitarian-based cases, complex cases, appeals, all sorts. We do all sorts, basically. Our phone number here is 407-995-6567. You can also send a WhatsApp to 404-333-8751. If you guys, someone is saying the audio is low, turn up your volume. If you can't hear me, let me turn off my space heater. So today I want to talk, what I was going to say is if you need to, get in contact with me, my number is on the ticker, or you can check my profile. Today I want to talk about elements of a VAWA case, and how to be successful or how to have the elements to prove it. First of all, what is VAWA? So, of course, most of you know that VAWA stands for Violence Against Women's Act. So it says violence against women, but it's not for only women, it's for women and men. So I just kind of wrote down a list here of things that I just want to make sure I talk on. So, first of all, what that means is that you first of all have to prove that you have a qualifying relationship with an abuser. Who are the abusers in your life that make you eligible for VAWA? The first would be if you're the spouse of a U.S. citizen or a green card holder that is an abuser. That is one element, okay? Or you're the child of a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. Also know that there are some age requirements of when you can file or not file. I'll get into that if I have enough time, but I want to just cover the elements. And the third qualifying relationship would be the parent of a U.S. citizen child. That child must be older than 21 years old to be, meaning the child that's an abuser. So those are the three types of relationships, first of all, that can qualify you. I've had people come into consultation saying that they filed VAWA against their brother or their grandfather or whatever it is. Those make you ineligible. These are the only people that will qualify you. So typically, what does USCIS want to see for common proof of the qualifying relationship? So typically, some things that you're going to want to see would be, of course, your marriage certificate. If you're divorced, your divorce certificate. Remember, you can file VAWA up to 2 years after a divorce. But after 2 years, you will no longer be eligible. So if you are divorced, you have to make sure that you file it before the 2-year anniversary of your divorce. Other things that help for them to identify the abuser or to know that you are really in a qualifying relationship. So it's the marriage certificate, the divorce certificate, the birth certificate if it's for a parent or child, and then of course proof that that person is actually a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. With U.S. citizens, sometimes depending on how you escape the abuse, you may not have evidence, like in terms of a birth certificate or passport. One of the things that we usually do is, if you don't, we request that USCIS do the verification by asking certain questions, as much information as we have on the abuser, like full names, middle names, what country, what state we think they were born, if we know their social security number, their date of birth, last residence, like all of those things, for them to be able to authenticate or verify them in their system. We do the same for if they're naturalized. This is where we believe they naturalize. Basically, as much information as we can. Okay. So the next thing, number 2. So the first element is a qualifying relationship to an abuser. The second element is good faith marriage if it is a spousal case. I cannot stress this enough. Good faith marriage does not mean we have a marriage certificate. That just means that you have a qualifying relationship. Good faith marriage means that you entered into this marriage genuinely and not just for immigration. Okay? It means that this is a marriage that you hoped would end up in your happily ever after, but this is what happened in the relationship. I've talked last week about different things that you can use to support that, showing joint leases, mortgages, bank accounts, insurance photos together, affidavits, all those types of things. So that would be the second element. Okay? The third element, and one of the most important element, is battery or extreme cruelty. Battery is going to be physical abuse, or extreme cruelty. Extreme cruelty is going to cover things like emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, abuse of the legal system, coercive control, technological abuse. So as you can see, it just runs and runs and runs. In physical abuse, of course, physical abuse is harder. It's easier to prove if we have evidence of that, whether that's a police report, or whether that's bruises or pictures of that, or you went to the doctor because of physical abuse, and because I know also in this administration, it's very difficult and scary for a lot of people to contact the cops, because you don't know who is going to report you to ICE or not report you to ICE. But if you ever are able to have the courage to, the police report, it helps. If you're not able to, and you're able to go to a doctor to seek treatment or certain things that happen, it's important that you document those things, okay? It's really important that you document those things, and not just random arbitrary stuff. I know that most people say, well, when this is happening to me, I'm just not thinking of recording. But, if you have any visible injuries from physical abuse after the fact, you want to document those things, at least when you're outside of the situation that is happening. For extreme cruelty, think about trauma, anything that causes trauma to a person. And trauma looks very different for everyone. So there are going to be some people who have come from a culture of immense abuse, meaning they grew up where their father or mother used to beat the crap out of the other partner. And so one punch or one slap is nothing, and they don't look at that as abuse, right? Or they've told them, they've heard from their own family, they've told them horrible things about themselves. And so when that person is saying that to them, telling you that you're not a good father, or that your manhood is so small, compared you to maybe their previous relationships, or saying that you're not a good mother, you're not beautiful, like you need to go get your boobs done. I can't tell you, by the way, how many clients we have that have put themselves under the knife just to look good for their partners, and those people still ended up doing these things to them and cheating on them. They went and got like the BBLs, like the boob jobs and all that, just to help, their self-esteem with that person. Or sometimes control looks the opposite, where they don't want you to look good, because they know that looking good means that other people might be attracted to you, and they could lose control over you or the relationship based on their dominance. For instance, we've had clients where the woman doesn't want the guy, or the woman, or the man doesn't want the woman, or whatever, even if it's the same sex, to go to the gym. They don't want them to get fit. They don't want them to look good. Once they start looking good, or losing weight, or they start dressing nicely, putting perfume, like they feel threatened. They feel like, well, why are you looking good? What's going on? Are you cheating on me? Who are you cheating with? Bring your phone. Let me see your phone. Why do you have a password on your phone? Your phone should always be open. I should be able to scroll through your phone at any given moment. So that's an example. Some people, they want to better themselves. They want to go to nursing school. They want to go get an education. And then you have, abusers that tell you that you're not smart enough, or tell you that you're stupid, that you can't get an education. You're not going to be able to graduate. That's very psychological. When someone makes you feel small, if they keep telling you this and this and this all the time, you begin to believe that that is who you are, or where they gaslight you and make you feel that you're the one who's at fault. Or maybe you've even shared trauma, with that person. And then all of a sudden, you get into an argument or a fight, and they use that trauma and say, yeah, that's why your children don't like you. That's why, that's why you will never be with anybody, or tell you that you will never find anybody else because you're not good enough, or tell you that they own you because of their legal status and you don't have any legal status. People who make fun of your culture, who threaten or use what is going on right now in the United States as a threat in an argument. Oh, you want to argue with me? I will call ICE on you. So these are different examples of extreme cruelty. And so with extreme cruelty, we usually don't want just a one-off incident, because, obviously as humans, we're flawed. And, sometimes people say things that they don't mean, but we look at a pattern of behavior. This is what USCIS is looking at. They're looking at a pattern of behavior that has become so extreme that is causing that emotional and psychological damage or trauma to a person, or sexual abuse or financial abuse, or coercive control. So these are just examples of battery or extreme cruelty. Sometimes they will even isolate you. They will isolate you from your friends. They will isolate you from your family, so things like that, or even stalk you. Like sometimes people will call you and keep calling you on your phone at work, putting you at risk of losing your job. I see Ayana saying, yes, patterns. I guess, are you a therapist? If you are, that you probably know, these patterns as well. So, like they will call you. Like, I remember one client, his wife called him, I think she called him about 35 times, like back to back within 35 minutes, and then started calling the office, like his work, where the boss was just like, listen, it's either you're fired or you stop with this woman, because I can't deal with this. So like when they do that, that's part, like where they're unhinged, essentially. So some evidence that is good. Oh, so Ayana, you're a therapist, so you know what I'm talking about. Evidence that helps to support that will look like, of course, if you have a police report, that's great. If you don't, that's fine. If you have protective orders could be temporary or permanent, like an injunction. Or saying that this, you have a protective order where this person cannot come within certain feet of you. Therapist letters. I cannot stress psychological evaluation, especially when your abuse is not physical. While psychological evaluation is not a requirement, and a lack of it doesn't mean your case will be denied, it is very important to support extreme cruelty. Because there are ways that you can articulate yourself and explain it to a therapist, that a therapist can help you to put the puzzles together in your evaluation, and be able to show that to USCIS and say, look, there is, you guys may have heard of something called battered women syndrome, where sometimes you can be a victim of abuse, but stay in the relationship or keep going back and going back because of a cycle of abuse, or because of a power and control wheel and dynamic, right? Oh my gosh, I'm just looking at the time and I realized that I still have so much to talk about and not enough time. So maybe I'll stop, doing the examples. But so in cases like that, when you can get of psych eval, it's good. And even if you don't get a therapist report when you do your initial submission, it is something that I encourage you to do if you've been a victim of abuse. One, because it's helpful to you. Two, it's always so good to have it, so that if you do get a request for evidence, you can show that this really did happen. I can corroborate this, and I am still seeking therapy for this. The fourth thing, and this is one that I will say this is the number one reason that most people get denied: residence with the abuser. You must prove, and I'll talk about the military exception, which I think a lot of people confuse, the requirements of that. You must live with the abuser. Before December 17th, before December 16th or 17th, you could have shown that you lived with the abuser before marriage. But now you have to show that that you lived with the abuser after marriage. After is a key word. So they must show cohabitation after marriage. Someone is asking, let me just deviate, if they cheated on you and have a kid, an incident of cheating on its own is not extreme cruelty, according to USCIS. That said, it is how they are moving with that infidelity, right? How are they gloating it to you? Is it unconscionable? How are they throwing it in your face? Is there a pattern of behavior? Is there a pattern of repetitive cheating? Are they putting you at risk of an infection? Are they putting you at risk of an STD? Which you can argue that they are if they're having a kid, which means that they're having unprotected sex. So we look, because I guarantee you, if there is infidelity, you're looking at all the other things. There will be other things. And a lot of times with infidelity, especially if you find out, that person will usually gaslight most of the time if they're not ready to come clean and say it's your fault, and try to mess with your psychological. So really, it's not a one fits the puzzle. You got to kind of look at it in different contexts. So I want to go back to residence with the abuser. So proving residence with the abuser, there are different things, it doesn't matter how long you've lived together, as long as you can prove that you lived together. And even in that short time, the intention was living together, and that the abuse is what left you not living with that person, especially when you have a short-term cohabitation. Some things with that will be, of course, leases, bills, school records, mails that address both of you in that address, school record affidavits, just a whole bunch of things. And then, I'm skipping because I have like 1 minute and I gotta go. And then the final one is good moral character. So if you are over the age of 14, we are looking for, or USCIS is looking for 3 years of good moral character. So they usually want a police clearance or FBI clearance. Preferably, I prefer to send the FBI clearance because it covers every state that you've lived in. If you've not lived in any other state and you can get, let's say, your FBI clearance on time, then you can get your police clearance. So basically they're looking for things that there's no disqualifying criminal history, no false claim to U.S. citizenship, no immigration fraud cases, those types of things, or any crimes of moral turpitude. That's what they're going to be looking for. And then one thing I want to talk about is the military exception to VAWA. And pay attention, because this really confuses a lot of people. In a normal VAWA case, you have to have resided with the abuser in the United States, right? Or the abuse had to have taken place in the United States. The only time where it can be outside is if the abusive spouse is a U.S. citizen. Notice I said U.S. citizen and a member of the U.S. Armed Forces or U.S. government employee that is stationed abroad. If that is the case, you can still file VAWA if the abuse occurred outside the United States. So you're listening, the abuse occurred outside the United States and the person was in the military. Then that is when you can use the military exception. So whether you were abroad when the abuse, you were abroad when you filed, you can be permitted to use that exception. Or if you're living in the United States, but that abuse was part of the person being in the military, outside the United States. So that is when you'd be able to use the military exception. They also call it like a military government overseas exception. So those are the elements basically for VAWA. I could probably spend hours on this because there's just so many nuances and so many little different pieces of VAWA. I think next week I will probably do like a series on benefits of VAWA, then I'll talk about T, do benefits of T, talk about you, just so that we can talk about all the humanitarian-based cases that are a bit more complex, as opposed to a marriage-based case, so you guys can understand. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. I'll be back on live Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So jump on, and if I didn't get to answer your question, definitely schedule a consultation so we can talk about your own case one-on-one. All right, guys, have a good day.